Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Matthew from Impact Innovation Group, and we're working with the Queensland Government to deliver these series of webinars on behalf of the Office of Small Business. Today's topic is creating new ideas for small business with our guest presenter, Dr. Tim MacTaggart from QUT Blue Box. Just while we're waiting for other people to connect into the webinar, I'll go through some of the tools we'll be using for those people who haven't viewed a webinar using the Citric GoToWebinar systems before. Your screen should look like this: a slide in the center and a control panel or dashboard on the right. This control panel will climax automatically when you're not using it. So to keep it open, just click the View menu up the top and uncheck the Auto Hide Control Panel option. During the webinar, we may ask you questions to better understand your experience with the topic. To respond to these questions, we will ask you to raise your hand. To do that, just click on the little hand icon on the side of the control panel. Remember to lower your hand afterwards just by clicking the icon again. We will also encourage everyone to ask questions on any of the content featured today. So that the webinar can flow smoothly and we stick to our time allocated, we prefer to answer the questions at the end. However, please feel free to ask questions as they come to you. Just so that we know this function is working, can we have everyone please press the little blue raise your hand button, please? Wonderful. Thank you so much, Liz, Suzanne, Haley. Awesome. All looking good from this end. We also have handouts for you, which you can access and download by clicking on this section. Tim has very kindly agreed to share his slide deck with us, and they have been specifically prepared to help you better understand today's content. They will not be available for download after the completion of the webinar, so I'll remind you again just as the presentation is ending. So now it's time for our presenter. As the world becomes smaller and more connected, small businesses need to work harder than ever to remain competitive. Creating and implementing innovative ideas are central in growing small businesses and to ensure they sustain for the future. Innovation can be difficult to understand and implement, but in the last 20 years, Tim MacTaggart has built mobile phone telephone networks, run construction businesses, delivered gas line projects, and undertaken doctoral level research and helped commercialize clean energy technologies. Tim is a dedicated innovation professional who has founded a startup to bring a tech-based consumer product to market, helped commercialize a concentrated photovoltaic technology and energy storage technology, undertaken research into disruptive technology, and currently trains University of Queensland's future entrepreneurs in all things innovation. So Tim, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, John. Okay, so we got, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out this afternoon, particularly, I guess, as we have Melbourne Cup coming up, so we've probably had a few attendees stolen by that event. But today I want to talk about some tools you can use to look for new ideas you can apply in your business. Unfortunately, I can't give you any silver bullets on creating new ideas. They kind of are driven largely by the context of what you're trying to do and your customer base, but we'll go through a few things. A lot of what I'll talk about today will be very much focused on seeing what jobs customers are trying to get done, which is not necessarily the way innovation gets approached all the time. But we'll go through that in the second half. But in terms of today, there are kind of two things I wanted to cover. So one was just general sources of new ideas and places that you can look if you are looking to do something innovative and add to your business. And second of all, I just want to go quickly through 4 tools that you can use to analyze opportunities in the marketplace. So just to get into the first part then, where to look for new ideas. There are kind of, some people have identified 7 areas that you can look. The unexpected success, incongruities, process needs, industry and market structures, and changes in perception or new knowledge. And there are varying levels of difficulty of applying each of those, with new knowledge being one of the most difficult because it presents one of the most risky ways to introduce ideas into your business. One of the basic principles around these sort of 7 areas, and just looking at innovation in general, is that innovation can be a systematic process. So it's not the stroke of genius in the middle of the night that comes up with a good idea. Most good ideas and innovative ideas come from a systematic analysis of business opportunities, markets, and customer needs. And these are what these are really aimed at doing. In terms of where those opportunities reside, the first four exist within your industry and company, and so you should have good knowledge in which to dig into those sort of four areas without looking too far beyond your existing business. Whereas the last three exist within the existing environment. So demographic changes, changes in perception in the marketplace, and new knowledge often occur or mostly occur outside of your existing business. So just to unpack each of those a little bit more. So the unexpected. The unexpected can be something that succeeds for unexpected reasons or in unexpected ways. So for example, Twitter was originally created as a communications platform, a one-to-many communications platform, and the company that developed it, not as a broad-scale social media communications platform. So that succeeded despite the fact that it wasn't designed for the purpose to which it was originally put or finally put. Similarly, the short message service was something which was created in mobile telephones for engineers to communicate to each other directly whilst they were building and tuning mobile phone networks, but it turned out to be one of the most successful innovations in telecommunications in the last 20 years and generates an incredible amount of revenue for people. Similarly, something that fails for unexpected reasons can be a source of innovation. A couple of examples listed here, the Ford Edsel, which is notorious for being a massive flop in the marketplace, but what it did for Ford was to shift their thinking away from targeting and developing products for income groups towards lifestyle groups, and in fact was the origins of the Mustang, was built in response to the failure of the Edsel, where Ford realised that the way they were marketing to their customers had moved on or needed to move on. Similarly, 3M created the Post-it notes. It's a fairly famous example. It was a failure from the perspective of the science that was being developed and the purpose that the adhesive was being used for. But when the researcher took some home, his daughter was using it to put notes on a fridge to communicate with his wife, and he realised that there was an opportunity there. So one of the reasons that the unexpected is such a good chance for innovation is that people often ignore it or dismiss it, or in fact try to avoid addressing those reasons for success or failure and just simply move on to looking at the normal operations of the business. So the unexpected is certainly a good place to look for opportunities. Incongruities, that's one where there's a difference that exists between expectations and realities, and we've seen this in a couple of instances and even more recently. So for example, in the United States, there was this pervasive belief within the US postal system and generally that people weren't willing to pay a premium for delivery of packages and letters. What FedEx found was that in fact people were willing to pay for priority delivery, in fact pay a premium, when the general consensus in the industry was that that wasn't the case. And so there was this incongruity between what people wanted and what people believed everybody wanted. Similarly, we've seen it going the other way, Amazon versus Best Buy, and there was a piece in the media on this on the weekend. So Best Buy is thriving in the United States. It's a consumer electronics store, not unlike JB Hi-Fi, where Amazon has been sort of sweeping all before it in terms of online ordering and delivery. Best Buy has seen an opportunity insofar as a lot of people were going into shops to check on something before they bought it online. But the opportunity they saw was that often people need to understand a bit more about the tech to be able to use it properly. So for example, if you buy a new television or a video recorder or a DVD, often there's a bit of a setup process there and you can't learn that from buying on Amazon. So what they did was that they started to have people in store who would help their customers understand not just the tech they were looking to buy, but how they would integrate it into all the other tech that they might have. And at the same time, they would match Amazon's price. So Best Buy has been growing strongly in an environment where a lot of retailers are shutting down in the face of Amazon because, again, there's this expectation that people were buying simply for price, but of course the opportunity there was to offer the price but value add by offering these services at the same time in store. The third area of process need, this one's a little bit more complicated, but certainly when innovations are created to support some other process or product, it can in fact open the opportunity for a new service. So the creation of ATMs were designed to allow 24/7 banking, but what it did do was freed up tellers to do more value-added tasks, which allowed banks to offer additional products in the banking branches rather than just simply transactional events. I mean, Uber Eats is another one. So Uber was created obviously to take people from A to B, but it spawned the opportunity to effectively and cheaply deliver takeaway food to people on demand. And so again, we've seen this evolution of a particular service that has been leveraged into another service again to the benefit of Uber and in fact for Uber Eats. Market and industry structure changes is the fourth one. So again, this is the fourth and final one where you can look internally within your business, but certainly changes to industry structures opens up opportunities. I mean, the rise of Amazon, as I was saying before, has created legitimacy. So people were very nervous about buying online not too long ago, but now many people will order much of what they buy online, and that's legitimised that as a way to purchase things. And so that makes small business online presences more acceptable as well. Now, hopefully most businesses these days have got online presence, not too many don't, but that indicated a change in sort of the market structure and industry structure where we changed from buying in shop to buying online. Demographic changes, this is one that gets talked about a lot, I guess. The shift of a large cohort of baby boomers into aged care and retirement has certainly been a focus for many, and aged care is a large area of opportunity. But there are other changes in demographics which open up opportunities for businesses as well. So whilst we've seen that aged care, certainly wealthy baby boomers looking for comfortable retirements and varying levels of care, but there are other changes in the demographics which create opportunities as well. So for example, the sharing economy and younger generations looking to not necessarily own assets, but use them when they can on a shared basis is opening all sorts of opportunities up for sort of shared economy type business models. And so the demographic changes are not just as people get older, but what sort of behaviours we see in new demographic groups coming through offers opportunities as well. Sixth area, so change in perception. So this is again is an interesting one. So where a change in perception, but there's no change in the facts, offers opportunities as well through a change in meaning. A good example of that is that there's been a rise in spending on health products, be it fitness or supplements, over the last sort of 10 or 20 years, and in fact there's been a decrease in people's perception about how healthy they are, when in fact all the evidence suggests to us being significantly healthier than we were as a population 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so there's been this perceptual shift in health and what you need to do to stay healthy and be healthy that's opened up the opportunity for all sorts of health products, be it sort of things like NutriBullet or health supplements. So that's certainly a change in perception as opposed to reality, and not necessarily related to the facts. Excuse me. The final area is new knowledge. So new knowledge is obviously a great opportunity for innovation, and we see a lot of that here at QUT. It can be everything from AI or machine learning or Internet of Things and robotics. Very, very risky approach to innovation. It's certainly if you've got access to new knowledge and you've got exclusive access through patents or what other protections you might have, it certainly provides potentially a defendable position in the marketplace, but very, very difficult to implement. Often with new ideas, the market's unproven, as is the product or the service, and so you've got a range of uncertainties which make it very difficult and risky to bring those to market, which is why we see such a high failure rate in sort of new tech innovations in the startup environment. So, sorry, excuse me. So they're kind of 7 areas you can look for opportunities for your business. If you're interested in reading more on that, this book by Peter Drucker has been around for some time. It was first published in 1985, but I'll have to say that having studied innovation at a university level, I read this after that, and what struck me was that a lot of what he says in the book is incredibly insightful and still really relevant. Unlike a lot of modern innovation texts where things get more complicated, this particular book by Drucker just sort of carved out the basics of how you go about innovation in a systematic way within an existing enterprise. So it's definitely worth having a look at. It's fairly cheap on Amazon if you want to get a copy. A lot of the examples in there are quite outdated, obviously, but still worth having a look at if you get a chance. So they're kind of the 7 areas of opportunity for innovation, and sort of just a way to think about how you might innovate within your business and to your benefit. So now I just wanted to kind of talk about sort of 4 tools. I'm going to have to rattle through these relatively quickly, so hopefully you get the general gist of it. I suggest that if any of these look appealing to you, I can make some papers, things like articles from Harvard Business Review available to John via URLs for you to sort of download and have a closer look at if you want to, but it probably needs a little bit more investigation work, but at least it'll give you an insight into kind of some of the things you can do. Okay, so one other thing I just want to mention before I do get too far down the track is just that there is a perception, I think, these days, particularly with things like Uber and Facebook and Amazon and Google and Apple, that innovations need to be world-changing, and that's not the case at all. Most innovation starts out quite small and quite low risk and kind of grows over time. And there's a good example of that, whilst it's not the sort of area you guys will be playing in. You know, Intel, which introduced the 386 chip in 1985, has been iterating on the basic architecture ever since. So for the last 30 years, they've made $287 billion based on that without any significant innovations, at least compared to the original one. And Microsoft introduced Windows 3.1 in 1985, similarly just been updating it progressively ever since, and they've made $325 billion. I hope one of you guys listening goes on to make that sort of money. If you do, please let me know. But it demonstrates the point that you can start small without aiming for earth-shattering or industry-changing innovations and still be quite successful with innovation. Okay, so just then part two. So 4 tools to analyse opportunities. These are the 4. So I know that kind of sounds a bit academic, and I guess to some extent they are, but they're quite practical, and I've seen these applied really well by people in smaller businesses. So outcome-driven innovation, transforming your customer's experience, transforming products, services, and the attributes, or redefining your profit drivers. So we'll kind of go through all that. The reason I think these are quite good approaches to looking at analysing innovation opportunities in the marketplace is they give you a tool. There's a tool associated with each, which is actually relatively easy to use and apply, rather than just sort of being a descriptive method for trying to do innovation in your business. So we start with 1, outcome-driven innovation. This is a technique that focuses on the job that customers are trying to get done and the way that they assess whether they're being done successfully. Part of the problem with often when people kind of go about innovation is that they assume that, for example, that the customer's diagnosis of their problems were right. Customers don't always know how to solve the problem that they have. And also customers often come up with solutions to the problem, particularly when asked very directly about what their problem is, that may not be able to be implemented or cost effectively. And similarly, people could copy that fairly easily. And so the outcome-driven innovation really looks at the problems or the jobs that people are trying to get done. So, and then develop that product based on the job, how effectively it helps them achieve that job, rather than their perceived problem. So, as people apply this over time, they've recognised that customers can be quite unreliable in terms of the information they provide around the solution that they need. And similarly, you're not good at developing solutions. So, for example, no customer ever asked a market researcher if they wanted a microwave oven, and yet that solves a significant problem or helps a customer get a job done. If people had asked before the rise of the microwave, people probably would ask for faster ovens, better ovens, hotter ovens, but not a microwave. So again, it just illustrates that there's a degree of input from yourselves, knowing the business that you're in and what's possible, but also taking input from the customer in terms of what they're actually trying to achieve. So the key to this, of course, is that customers buy products and services to help them get jobs done. People buy lawnmowers to cut lawns. They buy insurance to limit financial risk and chocolate for enjoyment or romance or whatever it might be. The great example of the idea that people don't buy drills, they're buying holes, not buying drills, right? Because the outcome they really want is a hole. And so that just shifts your perspective potentially on the sort of product that you are going to develop. But again, here the focus is on the job, not the customer. And the customer uses a set of measures to judge how well it's getting done. And we call those the desired outcomes. For example, in judging a washing machine, you might measure how quick, how thorough, how efficient, or how quiet the machine is. And you can develop new opportunities by knowing which of these are important and which ones of them aren't terribly well served by existing products in the market. So we look at an example of that. So, for a circular saw, the job that people are trying to get done is typically cutting wood. What are the outcomes? How do people measure the success of the use of a circular saw? You know, they increase the likelihood the blade will begin cutting precisely on the line, minimise the time it takes, minimise the amount of pressure they have to exert, and minimising the frequency in which the cord gets in the way of the final cut path. So again, these are things that you can identify by talking to your customers rather than sort of coming up with them as a desktop exercise. But the key is to work out what those desired outcomes are. The key in kind of constructing one of those and using it as a vehicle for innovation is to sort of break it down a bit. So here we want to kind of construct a customer outcome in terms of a direction, a unit of measure, and an outcome. So here we've got minimise, so they're looking to make less of something, frequency, how often it happens, and what they're actually trying to achieve, how often the cord gets in the way of the cut path, as one example. So here we want to break that down, direction of improvement, unit of measure, and the outcome that people are looking for. So in terms of this, and again looking at the outcomes as opposed to solutions, you're not looking for solutions from people, you're just trying to find out what they're trying to achieve. So a good example here, you know, a customer might tell a razor manufacturer that they want a wider handle, you know, in response to being able to hold onto a razor more effectively. So the wider handle might be offered as a solution, but a better option might be a regular size handle with a ribbed or rubberized grip. So customers don't necessarily know the range of possible technical solutions that are available to them, and they also have limited knowledge about how one feature might affect other features. For example, how do the handle and the head fit together? And so what you're looking for here is criteria on how they want to, how well a product meets their needs, and not so much their ideas about it. So just as a word of warning when you go through this kind of a process. So you can identify outcomes at various stages of the customer experience. So here we have, you know, of the job to be done being cutting a piece of wood, plan the cut, adjust the saw, start the cut, operate the saw, complete the cut and maintain it. But within that sort of narrow band of operating the saw, we've got some outcomes that a user might be looking to do, or some outcomes. So minimising the time to measure, to cut, and the amount of time it takes to work out what type of cut is best. So we're kind of breaking this down at a fairly granular level about the outcomes that someone's trying to achieve with a product throughout the process of using it. So then once you've identified what those outcomes are, we want to prioritise them in terms of the importance to the customer and how satisfied they are with each of them. So an opportunity exists when customers are dissatisfied with how well their important outcomes are being served, and you can design a solution that in fact meets those. So the mechanism for doing that and going through it in a systematic process is a thing called the opportunity algorithm. It's just a simple mathematical formula that makes it possible to discover the most promising areas of innovation. So that algorithm is simply in importance, and the maximum of importance minus satisfaction is 0, which sounds a bit abstract, but what it does allow, and I'll show you in a second how that works, to kind of identify opportunities. So here's some research done by Bosch into circular saws. They looked at a whole stack of outcomes people were looking for in the saw, so you can read them there, and they asked them how important they were and how satisfied they were. So you can see here at the top, minimising the likelihood of going off track when approaching the end of a cut was ranked as the most important feature, but people generally were unhappy with how Bosch's saws performed in that respect. Whereas at the other end of the scale, we've got, you know, minimising the likelihood of getting cut, very important to people, but also very well addressed through the current product offerings. And so when you plug that into the opportunity algorithm, you know, the first one at the top, which is how it's ranked, is 15.8 through that equation, whereas minimising the likelihood of getting cut is quite low in terms of the opportunity that exists. Whoa. So I've kind of explained that. You can look at that later at your own time. And the opportunity is to target those ones with the high scores. Anything over 15 in this case, you know, going down, you know, 12 to 15 can be low-hanging fruit and so forth. You know, an outcome can be overserved when its satisfaction is higher than the importance rating. And the important thing to think about here too, of course, is if you've got a product where people value it, but it's overserved, then you're probably throwing money away by over-investing in something that, you know, goes beyond what people are looking for. So it's another good way to kind of have a look at your existing offering and just see whether there's a way to rejig it to offer greater value to your customers at a lower price to them at the same time. So here we see just a little bit of a graph. Now, so you're looking at these areas, the underserved, things that are very important to people, but people aren't particularly satisfied with the greatest opportunity. So here again, just highlighting the underserved features there. were the ones to have a look at. And similarly, doing the assessment against your competition. So again, if the competition's serving something really well and you're not, sorry, that's an opportunity to sort of close the gap. Similarly, if there's overserved features, it's an opportunity to potentially strip costs out of your offering without necessarily impacting on your customer's user experience. So the way to go about this, sorry, is to actually interview customers and identify, the jobs and the key customer outcomes that they're trying to achieve. Write those outcomes in the form of those outcome statements in the way we looked at it before. So sort of 3 elements: the direction, what they're trying to achieve, and the outcome they're trying to get. Go back and interview those same customers after you've done it, and just check that they agree with the statements as you've constructed them. Make sure there's been nothing lost in translation, and then ask them to rank each outcome in terms of importance and satisfaction. Record that and get an overall score. Plug them into the opportunity algorithm, and then you can hopefully come up with products and services or modified versions of your existing products and services that meet the underserved needs. So that's one tool you can use. I've seen that one applied really effectively by a couple of small companies. It's a systematic process to go through, analyse your offering, analyse your competitor's offering in the context of what your customers really value. Because often there can be a temptation to think that you've got the solution, and hopefully you guys probably all realise, being in small business, that in the end the customer's the one that decides whether a solution is of value to them or not. And this is just a systematic way to go through and kind of analyse that. So the second strategy, transforming your customer's experience. So this is very much about rearranging the experience that a customer has with your business to better achieve their desired outcome. So again, we're looking at very much at what they're trying to achieve as opposed to the mechanics of how you offer it to them. So the tool for that, again, there's a tool, it's called consumption chain analysis. And this one's, again, relatively straightforward. What's a consumption chain, you ask, I hear? Well, they're a linked set of activities that customers engage in to meet their needs. So here's an example of a consumption chain for a manufactured product. Now this goes all the way through from when someone first becomes aware of what they might need, be it a washing machine or a circular saw or a car or a business service of some kind. There's a process to go through: searching, selecting, ordering, financing, paying, and so forth, all the way through to when people use the product and, in fact, even dispose of it in the end. Because, again, disposal of a product can be a problematic process for some people, and there can be opportunities to innovate around the disposal of a product. I think that one of those opportunities, for example, might be as we see energy storage come onto the marketplace, getting rid of old lithium-ion batteries is going to be highly problematic. There's probably going to be a business opportunity to retrieve and recycle those batteries over time, which no one's really having a look at the moment. Similarly, you can do a consumption chain for a service business, similar kind of number of steps, in terms of service encounters, paying, whether there's ancillary activities, complaints, dealing with complaints and renewing contracts. And so the point of all this is to map out that process and start to look at systematically about whether there are opportunities for innovation to add more value to your customer through the process. So a good example we'll go through here is just the transformation of music from into the digital world, which again has been happening for some time now, so it's a little bit outdated, but it's still worth having a look at. So in terms of the consumption chain for music, the basic process is to acquire music, select music and use it on the right there. And the outcomes you might seek to achieve in that process are minimising the time to take it, to find it, maximising customisation, as those of you who have done it before. You buy a CD, you get what you're given, whereas now you kind of choose track by track. You're minimising the cost, maximising the hearing quality, maximising convenience of use, and maximising frequency of use. So again, to derive these desired outcomes, you should talk to your customers. You can do a desktop exercise, but in the end, what you think doesn't really matter. What matters is the people's opinions that are going to give you money for your service or for your product. But there can be these desired outcomes at different stages of this consumption chain. So if you kind of look at the big change in music between where it used to be consumed and the way it is here, and you can look at this in detail later, but obviously you used to go into a retail store, browse racks, buy a disc with a set of songs on it, pay for it, go home and play it. Whereas now you might get a song referred to you from a friend or recommended from artificial intelligence like Spotify. You then purchase it online and away you go and you play it. In fact, these days you can rent it. You don't even need to own it. So the consumption chain for music has changed significantly. Again, aimed at not just it's enabled by technology, but not purely for that. It's about giving customers a better experience. So if you kind of look at across those dimensions of the needs, outcomes that customers are trying to achieve, then the digital process is much better on pretty much every measure, except perhaps for minimising cost, although that's also better than it has been in the past. Obviously, the companies that have innovated in this space have captured some of that value for themselves. We still pay $15, $18 for what is essentially the equivalent of a CD, whereas in the store it might have been $20, $25. It's obviously a lot less expensive to produce that digitally than it has been to distribute a physical medium, but those companies capture that value for themselves while hopefully also capturing a larger market at the same time. So how do you make use of that consumption chain analysis? First of all, again, map out your customer outcomes, make assumptions, but ideally go out and talk to your customers and find out what outcomes they're trying to achieve. Map the consumption chain. You'd go through and achieving those outcomes. Or map your own, or map those of a competitor. If you're not in that space already, use a competitor, but ideally do your own. Map the alternative consumption chain, showing how it does a better job, and look for a way to construct a superior consumption chain. So again, looking at what are you selling, where are you selling it, who are you selling it to, when are you making it available, and how are you making that available. So again, the music is a good example, and probably an extreme example of how the entire consumption chain for music has been completely changed and continues to change, but you can do a similar application to your existing business and existing ideas. So here's some examples. Strategy could replace the existing consumption chain with an entirely new one, and that's essentially what Amazon did by supplanting real brick and mortar bookstores in particular in the first instance, but other sorts of purchases now as well. So can you reshuffle the links in the chain to improve that customer experience? You can digitize to combine or replace links in an existing chain, and that's certainly what's happened with online music. You can make some links smarter. So an example we didn't go through here, but Oral-B, when they put the blue-coloured bristles in their brush heads, the idea with that was that in that whole consumption chain, often people would buy a brush, but you don't really know when you should replace it. It's very difficult to tell. And so what Oral-B did was they put these blue bristles in that wear out over time. And so when there's an adequate amount of wear, it's saying to you, well, it's time to go and buy a new toothbrush. And so they've innovated on that whole consumption chain by informing people of the time to go and get a new toothbrush. Now, whether they made more money out of that, I don't know, but you can anticipate that people would, generally speaking, replace their toothbrushes a little more often. So that's about hassle, informative and user-friendly, and can you eliminate time delays in the chain? ATMs paying bills online, mortgage brokers finding a home loan for you. So can you shorten expensive and frustrating time delays in that overall consumption chain? And certainly you see these questions now about people asking, well, why can't I track a package that's being sent to me every moment of the day? There's an expectation now that you should know where those things are, and so again, those sorts of opportunities arise not necessarily at the end of the line or in the purchasing, but on that whole consumption chain from awareness through to buying, use, and disposal of a product. So that's certainly a reasonable, powerful way to kind of look at what you're doing and what value you're trying to add to your customer, but again, very much focused on the job that the customer's trying to get done and improving that experience. Okay, so the third one, transforming products, services, and their attributes. This is a little bit more complicated. We'll kind of go through it relatively quickly. I mean, the thing is that most products or services or offerings are bundles of attributes or features, if you like. Some of those are more important to people than others. And, as I was sort of saying before, if you underinvest in attributes that customer value, you risk losing customers. And if you overinvest in attributes that customers don't value, you can lose money. So again, with computers these days, most people are buying computers that are way more capable than they need. I know that I only run Microsoft Office and basically Chrome. I don't do anything more powerful than that, and yet I've got a fairly powerful laptop. So again, Dell which is the PC I've got, essentially over-investing in features that don't offer any value, so they're losing money even if they're not losing customers. Similarly, if they're under-investing in their screen or the connectivity or it being, a convertible notepad, which is both a tablet and a notepad, and that's what I value, then they're investing in that because I can't take the screen off and use it as a tablet. So the aim of this strategy is to maximise the number of attributes your product or service that satisfy customer outcomes better than the competition. So the key questions there are, are all the attributes of your product adding value? How do you know? And what's the best mixture of products and services for your customers relative to your competitors? So again, we come back to the example of the circular saw. So again, a good process to kind of flush these things out. And in this case, again, we've got this whole stack of features that are underserved because they're important and not being well satisfied. But on the flip side, at the bottom, we've got a whole stack of things that are being overserved and therefore being overinvested in and could be removed from the product without impacting on customer satisfaction. So how do you do this? That's the attribute map. In this case, is the tool. So what's that? It describes your offering in terms of what it does to please or displease customer segments. So this is the attribute map. I'll just go to a more explanatory version. So there are going to be features within your products that are simply non-negotiable. So for example, years ago, when cup holders, for example, were first introduced in the cars, they were a big selling point, believe it or not. I think Honda was the first to do it, and it made a difference to the sales of Honda's cars, believe it or not. But of course, over time, everyone just sort of integrated that into their cars as well, and now we have a point where people just expect certain things. Certainly, we're moving to the point where connectivity in cars, where you can connect your phone to the car, is becoming almost a non-negotiable. Whereas in the past, it would have been a differentiator. What are the safety performances around auto braking? Can be discriminators that positive discriminators for your product that help you make sales over competition. And then, of course, the exciters, so things that are even better. So not only do you have it, or a limited number of competitors have it, but it performs better than your competitors. And I think Volvo's done that for a long time in terms of the safety features of their vehicles, to get people energized about their products. On the negative side of things, something people won't perform very well, but people will simply tolerate it. So if it's a negative, but you do better than your competitors, then that's better, but not as good as tolerable. And then, of course, there are some things that people just simply will not tolerate and need to be engineered out of a product or a service offering as soon as they can. And then there's some things that people don't really care about, so what's. And those things you only really retain in a product or service offering if it allows you to service another market other than the one you're looking at the moment. So the key to this is to, is that your product offers different attributes. Every attribute evokes a different emotional response from a customer. And this sort of mapping process allows you to map you and your competitors' products to determine if you've got the right mix or not in terms of leading people to make a purchase. And the innovation opportunity here comes about when you can offer a better mix than your competitors and at the right emotional response. Now the thing about this is that it may not be a very durable competitive advantage, but I guess being able to do this on a regular basis to continue developing a product is kind of what gives you that competitive edge in the market over time. So there's a bit more explanation here about how those different parts of the attribute map work, which you can come back to. Some good examples here. So basic features, again, CD3 and MP3 players in cars originally were a differentiator, but now everyone expects them. In fact, CD players you probably wouldn't expect to see in vehicles anymore. And a good example of where you can probably engineer it out of a vehicle in favour of Apple CarPlay and Google's system within cars. So just remove those costs because you just don't need them anymore. Warranties can be a discriminating feature, and you see the sort of 7-year warranties on some vehicles and overall value for money on new cars in terms of those motor vehicles. Non-negotiables, safe airline, you wouldn't expect airlines to crash, but generally speaking, that's pretty much non-negotiable in terms of choosing an airline. Differentiator could be additional leg room or free coffee in a waiting lounge. And exciters can be perceived extra Australian for free, be it lounge membership or whatever it might be. Tolerables are something you should tolerate: waiting at doctors, security searches at the airport, dissatisfiers, long delays getting replacement parts for cars, white goods, and other products, and things that really annoy you. Uncaring or unfair service can be those sorts of enrages. So again, you want to kind of this is a systematic process to break down your offerings into these sort of categories to work out, well, what's adding value, what's helping me make sales, and what is detracting from sales, or I'm offering over and above what I need to, and it's simply not adding value to customers, and therefore could be removed or sort of wound back. So the steps for that, again, identifying the job and the key customer outcomes that are important but underserved. State what you see as the opportunity, do that attribute map, which is essentially that table for a key competitor, do your map, compare them, be very specific as possible in stating those. So, how you measure them. Don't just say we offer nutritious meals. You need to define that specifically. So in this case, offering nutritious meals defined in accordance with national healthy eating guidelines. So that's the kind of the process, and that will help you identify opportunities to modify your product to get better traction with your customers, or to introduce innovation into the product or service offering to improve your business. So how do you use that? So you can dramatically improve the positives. So in this case, an electric toothbrush, in terms of quality of outcomes with brushing your teeth. Eliminating tolerables or emerging dissatisfiers. So again, run flat tyres were acceptable in vehicles for a long time. Now we kind of have those compact spares. You're breaking up existing segments. So again, segmenting your market a little bit more closely based on a need that you identify through this process for a particular sub-market. Infusing your offering with empathy, that's a kind of tough one, but adding a compelling parallel offering, eliminating complexity and so there's a lot of different ways to kind of attack it, and as always, you want to capture the value you deliver. So if you engineer costs out of a product, for example, because it's not adding value to your customer, it don't simply reduce that price. Obviously, you want to capture some of that for yourself, sort of split the difference. So again, we want to maximize these for business returns. So that's the transforming your customer experience. And I guess just remember that things that are exciters can become non-negotiables pretty quickly, and you need to kind of continue to look at your product over time and continue to innovate. Okay, so the fourth one. This one's probably the most complicated of all, so hopefully I'll get the concept across to you relatively quickly. And the basic nub of this one is that as you try and fulfill your customers' needs, everything that you do in a business needs to kind of feed into that explicitly. There's a great example of Southwest Airlines in the US that is a highly profitable point-to-point airline that doesn't operate the way traditional airlines operate. Many airlines tried to copy their strategy and failed miserably because they kind of failed to understand how all these different things interlink together to add value to the customer and the way they're tracked. So hopefully I'll explain that a little bit more in the next couple of minutes. So the strategy is about identifying key metrics that determine performance in your industry, again, customer outcomes they're trying to achieve, and you work those out and set goals for each of the tasks that you undertake to try and fulfill those needs. So I'm going to have to go through this pretty quickly. We'll run out of question time. The model is the core model: customer opportunity, outcomes, objectives, activities, and resources. And I'll show a little diagram that hopefully explains that a little bit more clearly in a sec. But again, you're trying to work out what customers are trying to achieve, translating them into objectives for your business, and as specifically and measurable as possible, setting targets and basically building resources around it. Now that might sound very simple, but you probably all know, having run a business, there's often things that you do that don't directly feed into adding value to the customer, and sometimes those things can be they just hang around in a business for longer than they should or they need to. So again, we'll kind of go through that quickly. Core objectives. And one of the key things about these core objectives are very much real-time measures. So unlike, say, traditional measures of return on investment or net profitability or gross profitability at the end of a month, that's all rear vision mirror stuff and only indicates what's happened in the past. The idea with this is to get down to those tasks and activities that add real value to your customer and track those things in real time, because that will allow you to make substantive improvements to what you're doing and the value you're adding to your customer. And ideally you get leading indicators, so you can read that yourselves. So this is the kind of, I think, the diagram that helps under explain this. So again, customer outcomes in the case of the airline, they're trying to get cheap, quick, effective flights, point to point. Now they develop this whole set of core objectives that help them achieve that outcome, build activities that supported those objectives, and built resources around them. So this was kind of a map on a measurable core objective. So one of the objectives of Southwest Airlines was high asset utilisation, so having the planes in the air with lots of bums on seats. Part of that was maximising flights. Part of maximising flights was choosing the routes, turning planes around very quickly and no delays takeoff and landing. And here, as a core objectives, and they've developed these metrics that were very specific. So quick turnarounds, 10 to 15 minutes to turn the plane around. And they actually had all their staff, be it check-in, baggage loaders, captains, whatever it was. They trained them to say this was our core objectives and this is what you're focused on. So they had baggage handlers that would help check people onto planes. They had pilots that would help load luggage, because they were all incentivized and clear on those core metrics that they had to meet in order to meet their customer expectations. And they did it incredibly well, and have been and continue to be incredibly successful. it's all about those critical activities and key resources that you need to fulfill it. I'll let you go through this down the path later, and I'll make a paper or a document available that outlines the Southwest Airlines through John and through Impact Innovation Group that kind of explains how this all works. But part of the reason, because it was so tightly integrated, people looking from the outside in didn't really understand how it was working. For example, Southwest Airlines chose to have only one single model of airplane. They didn't have a variety, and they did their own maintenance, which was which is not what was happening in the airline industry in the US. And the reason that they did that wasn't, it was more expensive, but what it did allow was it meant that when they swapped one plane for another, if there was a technical problem, the pilots knew how to fly it. You know, the maintenance people had economies on spares, and they could get planes back onto the tarmac as quickly as possible. Whereas with different types of planes, that might make economic sense from a purchasing perspective, but not from the perspective of fulfilling this, you know, maximum asset utilization, which is one of their key objectives. So hopefully that's clear. And so how do you use that? So again, identify key customer outcomes, translate those outcomes into competitive and core objectives, convert them into performance objectives, work out what resources you need to fill those, and track those on a daily basis with a suitable set of metrics that your people understand. And so that's a good innovation strategy when you've got a similar product or service to competition, but you think you can deliver that more efficiently. Okay, so I've had to sort of rip through that pretty quickly. Some of these concepts take probably an hour to unpack in their own right, but again, hopefully it gives you some pointers towards, and you can go and do more investigation on these yourselves, but some tools that you can use to systematically work through opportunities in your marketplace to introduce innovation into your business. So again, just in summary, we kind of got those places you can look, those 7 places you can look, and Drucker's book's a short read and a relatively easy read if you want to kind of understand a bit more thinking around that. In there, he also outlines in the back half, you know, how to introduce management processes into a business to ensure that you're sort of innovation orientated. You don't get stuck in kind of that just managing by day to day. So it's worth having a look at that as well. And then there's these sort of 4 tools that you can use. I kind of like the outcome-driven innovation type of approach. It kind of filters through all the other ones as well. But certainly transforming your customer experience is another good one as well. The last one is more complicated, needs more time to undertake, but in terms of dipping your foot or toe in the water, then the outcome-driven innovation is a great one to start with. And then the only other thing I'd sort of tack this on at the end, I guess, just to give you, again, some food for thought and inspiration perhaps. But again, you can innovate across a whole range of areas, be it offerings, platforms, solutions, customer experiences, processes, you name it. And here's just some examples of what people have done to innovate across those different dimensions of what a business offers. So hopefully that provides a bit of input and sort of, again, a stimulation for thinking about how you might innovate within your own business. So I've gone over a little bit there, so I apologise for that. Hopefully it was valuable. And I guess it's question time. If anyone's got any questions other than who's going to win the Melbourne Cup, because I have no idea.
Yeah, otherwise is who's going to win and who's going to earn the most money, I think. Tim, we'll tell everyone, please feel free to ask any questions. We'll start with a few that just come through via email.
Yep.
First one, do you need to have a culture of innovation in order to innovate within your business?
Well, I think that you do. I mean, innovation is a creative process, right? Although it's still systematic. I mean, often innovative ideas can bubble up through the business. One of the key challenges with disruptive innovation, which we didn't cover, is that established businesses tend to stifle good ideas because it didn't come from management, it didn't come from people who are in control. And so you don't have to have it, but it's going to make it much easier to innovate if you do have a culture within your business that's open to new ideas and open to change and open to looking at new areas of opportunity, I think.
Cool. All right. How important is it to be granular when implementing innovation?
Well, I think the more granular you can be, the better. I mean, like all things, the plan itself may not be particularly useful, but it's the process of planning that is. And so the more granular you can be, of course, the more you're likely to understand the needs. So, for example, you're going out and talking to one or two customers will give you a vague or overarching idea of what they might be looking for in terms of what they value, but you're talking to 100 customers will give you a much finer and much more granular understanding. So when we see innovation programs for researchers, when we force them to go out and talk to customers that might actually use their research, there's this kind of inflection point. So you talk to sort of 5 to 10 customers, you start to get a general idea, but there'll be there'll be some things that you hear that are kind of conflicting, but it may not be at a deeper level they do conflict at all. It's just a perspective on things. You talk to sort of 20 customers and you kind of filter those things out, and you're really starting to drill in on what the real value add people are looking for. By the time you get sort of 50 customer interviews, not only do you understand what they're looking for, but you have a much deeper understanding of the what, why, and how, and where they're looking for it. And so, you don't have to be granular, but the more granular you are, the better understanding you're going to have, and of course that should lead to producing better outcomes for customers, and therefore more sales and better outcomes for your business.
Yeah, really good point. In terms of investment, how much should I be investing to create or to innovate within my business?
Oh, that's a good question. Not one that's a single answer to, really, I suppose. Big corporations can invest anything from a few percent to a large percentage in terms of sort of 12-15% of their revenue into innovation. It kind of depends what space that you're in and what you're trying to achieve to some extent. So yeah, I don't know if I've got a clear answer on that. If you're looking to innovate, this is going to sound like a motherhood statement. You just kind of invest what you need to invest to kind of get the returns that you're looking for. And I know that's a bit of a soft answer to the question. I just don't think there's a definitive percentage, because it can vary. I mean, again, if you're in defense industry, you're probably going to put a lot into it. If you run a chain of coffee shops, it's probably a little less. So it kind of depends. Sorry, not a very good answer, but a true one.
It's a fair comment. It also bleeds into this current question. Is there any one industry that should be innovating over any other?
No, I think there's innovation. I mean, if anything, if this sort of move to digitization has demonstrated anything, it's that every industry is open to innovation. And in fact, the ones that look the least innovative are probably the ones that are most susceptible, to significant change occurring. So this idea of disruptive innovation. So we see disruptive innovation now moving into media and finance. Banking in particular seems to be one of the big areas where people are saying this is the next frontier of disruptive innovation through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I think that the industries that look the least innovative actually probably present the greatest opportunity for the small company to innovate and capture value, because the big guys just simply aren't doing anything about it. So if you want to move into the search engine space with Google, good luck. But if you want to kind of innovate around that kind of industrial machinery, for example, then there's probably all sorts of opportunity in that space. So I think all industries should be looking to innovate, and the opportunities probably lie in the ones that appear to be the most stagnant and the most stable.
Yeah, good point. This one's a bit of a comment/question. I'll just read it out and see how you chew over it, Tim. Customers don't know what they need until I innovate. How do I position my innovation to ensure they buy? Wouldn't I just confuse a consumer with giving them something they don't know they want?
Well, potentially. I mean, I guess the key here is to work out what the job they're trying to get done, right? And so again, it's going back to understanding the job and looking for the gaps. So again, let's just say, for example, to try and think of a good example, if there's some part of a product that's, I mean, the great opportunities exist where people are using a product in a way you didn't expect. And this is kind of the unexpected success space. So again, if people are kind of cobbling together a solution to overcome a deficiency in existing offering, and you go and talk to them and watch what they do and find out that in fact, there's a hole in that process, and that's where the real opportunity is. So marketing that back to them shouldn't really be a problem. If you're already marketing a solution or a service or a product to them, or you're shifting it to say, well, okay, our product does this thing, and if it really truly is a problem that you've really validated by talking to them, then they should identify with that quite easily, and your marketing should all be built around that. So again, it all goes back to you're not guessing what people need and what their problems are and what they're trying to achieve, but actually talking to them and validating it. I mean, it's one of the great mantras of sort of the startup space these days, is that anything you might come up with, no matter how experienced you are, is really largely an assumption until you go and talk to the people who are going to use it, particularly when you talk about innovation, which essentially means doing something new. And so the more people you talk to about it, the more confidence you should have in implementing that innovation, and the more success you'll have in eventually selling it.
Yeah. I guess this is, again, leading on from that previous statement. I know you've talked about kind of focusing on the market that you're looking at to making sure that you're meeting that need, but how else would you mitigate risks while innovating?
Well, I think this process does in fact mitigate the risk. So again, the lessons from the last 15, 20 years, particularly in the tech space, is that if you innovate without talking to your customers, that's a massive risk. If you ever get a chance to read Eric Rice's book on the lean startup, he tells these stories about spending 6 months developing a product because they knew best, right? They'd been in an industry around games, I think it was, for years. They knew what was coming next in tech. They spent all this time hunkering down developing a product, and they went to sell it and nobody wanted it. Then they brought people in to look at it, and people were playing with it, and all of a sudden, the developers kind of went, "Why did you do that?" They went, "Oh, well, I don't want to do that. What I really want to do was this in this situation." They went, "Oh, but we thought, oh," and so they developed what the customer actually wanted, which gave them traction. And so you significantly de-risk this because you can go and talk to customers for free, right? Developing a new product or service is expensive, and you want to know that you're developing that product or service to meet the needs of an existing market through interviews and otherwise before you lay a buck down on doing it. So I would say that doing that kind of customer validation research work massively de-risks the opportunity. Another good example of that, not to extend the analogy too far, but working with CSIRO, who are now shifting their thinking around commercialising their research, go figure that one. But when they do it, they see, if they send a team that's been doing 10 years of research on something, they send them out in the marketplace to talk to customers, and the customers kind of go, "We don't want that." They see it as a win because they're not going to spend another 5 years channeling funding and manpower and womanpower into developing some technology that no one's going to want. So again, I think that just illustrates the fact that talking to your customers and using some of these tools once you've identified opportunities and going talking to customers, I think significantly de-risks it, from a small business perspective.
Yeah, very well put. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to land it there. So thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. Please remember to download Tim's handouts before you exit. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Impact Innovation Group YouTube page should you wish to view it again. You will receive an email with information about the Queensland Office of Small Business opportunities and programs, along with a short survey that will help us tailor these webinars to meet your interests and needs. Thank you, Tim, for your time and insight. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great Melbourne Cup day.
Thanks, John.
Have a good one.